So, right, giving me a
Sorry,
Jewish paper.
I forgot to hit record.
Okay.
Sorry, you're only 10 minutes late, people.
So what was my thought? But I really remember because we started reading Hebrew in first grade, and half the morning was Hebrew, and we would read Chumash, Torah, and we played sitter baseball, where if you didn't have the right word, you went back a space. And Julian, who went to, I think, he's at an Orthodox after school Hebrew school, who's his background is very different from mine, talked about playing sitter baseball. And I remember the kids, because we had services, Orthodox services every morning. And I remember the boys kind of running out and playing baseball. So that was such a part of it. And the fact that the first Hebrew teacher that I had, may he rest in peace, Rabbi Weisbach, he was really big on baseball, as his son, who's a very well-known philanthropist right now, who's very, very big into sports, which is not part of my upbringing at all, because I know nothing about sports. So this kind of brought back that reflection, but some of the visuals of just the heat, the hot rooms and the stunning and so forth. And then to this day, I have difficulty. We belong to a Reformed congregation for many, many years. So when I go into a congregation where people are talking in the background or running around talking inside or going in and out and in and out, I feel that conflict within myself, because I feel that I've gone back and forth between two worlds. I mean, I'm very much a Reformed Jew right now, but you kind of can't take the academy out of the girl. So I have to go back and reread it. So now I'm going to listen a little bit more and start.
I was actually thinking a little bit about you when I read this, just because I know of your Orthodox upbringing. All right, so Elaine.
Okay, I think in the beginning, when the father and son are taking their walk, the father wants so much to be part of his life, the son's life, and the son wants to be so much part of the father's life. It's a family story. It's not necessarily it is the pull of the modern world for the young people and the pull for the old time world for the older people, and the conflict between parent and child. I think that it's universal in what he was trying to say. And it was in some ways it was sad because they're pulling apart, and in some ways it wasn't, because they're trying to connect. But I think that is a universal feeling between families, no matter what religion you are, and especially in today's world. You think about the people that belong to the Central Synagogue that I see walking on Green Bay Road, and all of the intergenerational. I wouldn't even walk to Macomb from my house, which is a mile and a half away. And it's just the pull of everyday life that takes your interest away. And I think that was more, I think it's more of a universal story than necessarily a Jewish story. I think it is, but it isn't. I think this is what goes on in many families.
Yeah. Thank you. So I have Lynn, Joyce, Judy Feldman, and then Sandy. Lynn.
I would like to, I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah. Wait 1 second, Beverly.
Yeah, eventually I would like you to call on me also.
I will. Okay, got it.
I think the first two paragraphs of the story really set the tone and the mood and the theme, because he's taking a walk with his son through the world, and they're talking about social issues, and they're talking about justice, and they're talking about worldly things, and the father's leading the way. So for me, the conflict isn't just two forces against each other. I think the father is experiencing a conflict. He's being pulled toward the secular because he has this young son. And he feels, he's a teacher, and he feels as an obligation as a teacher that he has to teach his son a worldly perspective. That it can't just be a narrow religious perspective. So he goes to the baseball game. I mean, he's not paying attention to the baseball game, but he's with his son and he's bonding. And the bonding experience is crucial here. They're bonding on this walk, and it's a long walk. It's a several hour walk. So I think while I'm sort of piggybacking on what Elaine said, while it is a story about generational conflict, it's also a story about people who start out in one mindset and then begin to evolve in their perspective as different influences come into their life, particularly the birth of children, and what their obligation is to, it's not only a religious background that he has to impart to his son, but a worldly perspective as well. And I think that's why when he sees his son playing baseball, he doesn't rant and rave. He said, you've got to come in, we have to give this up. So that was my take on this story.
Yeah. All right. I have Joyce, Judy, Sandy, and then Bev. Joyce.
Well, I think the father expected the son to adapt in a way or accept the more religious world. But I got angry with the father at the baseball game that he was making no attempt to try and understand baseball, even though the son was trying to explain it to him. He had his head in the book. And yes, they were together, but they were apart. And that it just made me upset that the father had no idea what was going on when the son stood up on his seat and he saw mob action. When all the son wanted to do was, hold his hand up with the mitt so he could try and catch the fly ball. And it was because the father had no concept of what baseball was all about. And it irked me. It just really bothered me.
The only thing I can say to that, Joyce, is I once went to go see my son played 1 year of freshman football, and there's no announcers. I had no idea what was happening. I didn't remember his number. I didn't know which way he was going. And for the first time, I said, oh, that's what people must feel when they come into a service. It's all in Hebrew. They don't know what page you're on. And I think that even now, when we're used to listening to announcers, this is what's happening. They're running for first. He didn't even have that. Yeah, never mind. He didn't know what baseball was. Judy Feldman.
I think that this was a successful story because look at all the different attitudes and perspectives that we get from seeing it. I do believe it's a generational issue, generational story as much as anything else. But one thing that struck me, and I think it's because of the news cycle we're in politics, I found this a discussion of minorities and how we keep moving the benchmarks. And this son was going to change the benchmarks a little in his family from what it had been, even up to the last page when he doesn't even sing the words, he just hums them. The benchmarks are moving, and I found that I had to reread it a couple times. As you said, the change in the perspective was somewhat confusing, but I believe it showed the minority of what Jews are struggling with right now. We're being slandered. We're being a lot of things. And anyway, I saw it more as a minority discussion after I read it a bunch of times.
Okay, Sandy, Bev, and then Judy Biederman, and then Lynn Sallet. Sandy
I really.
oh, there you
like-
are. Go ahead.
I've been everywhere, in the doctor's office with you, driving in the car. Now I'm home. But I've been listening, and I really liked his writing. I liked the story. It just brought me back to the dichotomy that I always felt when I was a kid, because I grew up in an Orthodox community. And even as a little girl, I felt something was wrong, because my father was sitting up in front and quiet, and it's serious. And I was sitting in the women's section, and they didn't shut up. They were talking a lot in Yiddish, but talking all the time during the service. And I felt like something was wrong, and I wasn't allowed to go up there by my dad. My mother seemed to be so smart. She was an older mother, but she sent me after a while to a Reform temple that was nearby. And there I was in shock too, because they were playing an organ during the service. And nobody talked. It was so quiet in the assembly. And I was the only one that knew Hebrew. They didn't even seem to know Hebrew in the Reform synagogue. It was Gunther Plaut's synagogue. He was a famous rabbi who later became the head rabbi of all Canada.
Right.
But
He's the one who wrote our Torah commentary. He
Right,
is, yeah.
Right. And he was wonderful to me. I think he knew that I was confused, because I wasn't really part of the Reform synagogue. My parents weren't members there.
Yeah.
They never came. They just dropped me there for Sunday school. But I knew that it had to be something in the middle.
Yeah.
I love being a Reformed Jew today. After living in Israel, again, with the Orthodox.
That's another, right.
I love being at Solel Lakeside.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Bev.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be part of this group. I love short stories, and I particularly love this one. I could tell you a lot of things about my background, but I think I'll just stick to the story. It seemed that the Rebbe had a favored oldest son who died.
Mm.
And now this second son
That's true.
really was supposed to take over where the first son left off, but he didn't. And now he's taking his son. He moves away from Borough Park, from the very frum community where all the boys are dressed in black with black hats and are studying all the time. And he does comment in the story about some of the meaninglessness of it. And so now this father, this second son, moves to Queens, which is still a very Orthodox place, but not as Orthodox as Borough Park. And he does an injustice or a justice to his son by taking him on these walks. And David, the son, he kept his eyes averted. I'm reading here, aware of their Shabbos clothing and aware that he was in seeing things that were forbidden and that he might never be able to be a part of. And it's a story that's going on today in the Orthodox world, where the rules, the law is in Orthodoxy. But I personally have always believed that in the 20th and 21st century, there was place for a new kind of worshiping and a new kind of Judaism. But Orthodox Jews don't believe that, nor do any fundamental religions believe that if you change the rules, that it's okay. So this is a very contemporary story, because while there's a lot of young people becoming Orthodox, there's a lot of young people leaving Orthodoxy. And part of the reason they leave it is because they are exposed, as this young son was, to the secular world. We don't know what's going to happen to him in the world, but we know he likes baseball, and he feels that he's walking and living through, seeing a world that he's never going to be able to be a part of.
Yeah, he's going to end up in Oregon. That's
End up
that's
in
what
Oregon.
happened.
End up in Oregon. And that's, I mean, it's in a way, it's a very sad story. And I would just say that my daughter, who is a Baal Tshuva, an Orthodox woman, but comes from a secular home, so already there's problems, and allowed us, my husband and I, to expose her Orthodox children to theater and art and music, which was a good thing and a bad thing, because not all her children stayed Orthodox. And when my daughter got her PhD, her thesis was, why do children leave Orthodoxy?
Wow.
She did her thesis on it. So I really related to this story without judgment. I thought it was a brilliant story, and I liked it very much.
Thank you. Judy Biederman, then Lynn.
Well, I think what we wanted was to see a connectiveness between the father and the son, between the secular and the lay and the religious, blah, blah. I thought he set us up early, because on page 113,
Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
towards the bottom, he says, when he's visiting his dad at school, and the whole place is not what we would call school, not even an exit sign. It says this was his other world when he's not home with us. And so you know right away, those two do not overlap. So the dad is happy to see him and whatnot all, but they don't come together. And they really don't come together throughout the story. But I thought he set us up early on what page that was, 113. So that's my take on it.
Lynn.
One in-service that we had at the high school sort of illustrates this story. We were divided into groups, and we went into a classroom, and the person who was leading the in-service spoke to us only in Spanish, and none of us spoke Spanish. And we looked at each other, and we were getting more and more frustrated as the session went on. And finally, Kathy Abreu said to us, "What do you think this was all about?" And it's about not only a perspective of students who, immigrant students who come into the educational system and hear English and don't know what's happening, but I think it's about this story. The young people, to them, the traditional and the ritualistic seem chaotic and confusing to them. Just like this, and I disagree with you, Joyce. I think the fact that he went to the baseball game was important. I think the fact that he couldn't focus and was mystified by, all the chaos is indicative of what happens when we enter a new world and we're trying to understand it. So they may not bond, but there might be understanding and insight that develops And that's all you can really expect. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who think Reform Judaism is a sacrilege, who come from the Orthodox. And my husband, for one, who grew up in the Orthodox family, has learned to adjust to appreciate Reform Judaism. But it took a long time. So I think this is going to take a long time. And it's going to take more than 6 days for sure for that to happen. But I think the idea of clash, maybe this author is trying to say there is going to be a clash whenever you have two disparate philosophies or perspectives. But the optimum is trying to reach an understanding. And to me, that quiet walk was so important to their relationship. It was a necessary walk. It was an eye-opening walk, so that this boy would not be raised in a narrow, one-minded community, that he would see the injustice. He would see what was going on. I mean, so that's my take on it. I thought the bonding was very important. But the thing is, they're going to have to bond maybe over other things rather than the religious things. Who knows? Who knows?
All right. I have Judy Feldman, Judy Biederman, Merle, Elaine, Ellen.
Okay. I agree with Lynn. And on the very first page, page 111, at the bottom of the second paragraph, it says, after the father's walk, he and his father are walking, and he is learning from his father. He's observing, he's learning how to observe the world. And he says, and it was a measure of the world's perversity, the inherent unfairness of things, and that this would always be so. So he's recognizing from his father's walk how things are changing, but that he's still different because he believes it will be unfair for a long time. One would hope after, it depends on how many times you read the story. I see different things every time I read it. It's crazy. I mean, I don't think I've seen a short story that's made me this ambivalent about where I want to decide it is. Anyway, that's my comment.
Okay. Merle.
I think Birnbaum, David's father, is the person who suffers most for being caught between the two generations. And there's this one quote that really struck me. When he moves from Brooklyn to Queens, there was defeat, a taint of abandonment in his leaving. He and Ruthie had planned a bright new life, and this was not it. And so he's, I think, moving because of his job and just not really happy. It wasn't the way he wanted his life to turn out. And also, he says he was disappointed in himself.
We'll call you later. Bye-bye.
He was disappointed in himself and obscurely in his father, the rabbi, for accepting him as he had turned out.
Right.
He was disappointed in the way he had turned out. He didn't seem to be pleasing his father. He didn't seem to be pleasing his son. He certainly wasn't pleasing himself in his job. His son points out that the students at the school did not really respect his father, even though his father had tremendous responsibility for so many things at the shul, at the school. He was just trying so hard. And I think that what Lynn was saying about that journey on the walk, that in the journey through life, we don't always see what we want. We don't always get what we want. So I felt very sympathetic to the father, Birnbaum. Yeah.
Elaine.
Okay, I'm going back to the reality of life in a family. I have, as you all know, grown grandchildren who have very, very different ideas than I have. And I think those of you who have grown grandchildren and my children have different ideas. My son comes in the other day and he informs me that he's buying me new dishes and new silverware because he doesn't like my dishes and my silverware. I said to him, what? Why are you doing this? I'm perfectly happy. Well, you've had them for 30 years. There's nothing wrong with them. But he's superimposing his ideas on me. And I'm saying, I don't want this. I don't want this. So anyway, I think that it's a very difficult time. And if you have to remember, I think I'm right. This is a portion of a story. It is not a complete short story. It was taken out of a larger story. And I think it is so difficult in today's world for all of us to get our thoughts across and to be who we are. I don't think anybody is truly themselves anymore. I think we all compromise every single day to get along.
I think that that's absolutely fascinating. It's giving us a
And now
lot
everybody
to think about. Alan,
Okay, well, I didn't get a chance to read the story until last night, so I have only read it once, other than the review that I did this morning and listening to all of you, and I agree with much of what was been said. But go back to the title of 6 days. There's 6 days between Shabbat and the next Shabbat, and it's kind of a metaphor for life. And I think what Elaine just said about the superimposing of, many generations superimpose upon the next, but I think you got to give the father credit for not doing that. I think the father is trying to live his life. He says he's not, life didn't come out the way he thought it was going to be. Are any of us totally ever satisfied? But yet he's going to experience life with his child, with his son, as opposed to superimposing or, trying to get him to be his way. I thought it was a wonderful insight into generational differences. I mean, generations are never the same. And then if you take a conservative or Orthodox, in this case, Jewish life, and compare it with a child that's growing up in a more secular society, of course there's differences. So I don't know. I think I went back while you were talking, thinking that maybe there were 6 separations, but it starts with the Friday nights, which was wonderful. It sets the whole scene. It shows the empathy as has been discussed. It goes to the high school where the father taught that the son thinks it looks like a castle, which is kind of indicative of maybe that it's not, it's not something he's accepting as being normal, in terms of his school. And then it goes to the Brooklyn shul, and then you've got the part. So there's only 5 gaps, is what I'm saying. There's the Yom Kippur and the Passover, and then it ends with the Saturday night post Shabbat, going back into the life, and everybody's looking for a better. The last sentence is. Looking around them at the new season, come out to praise God's world and asking his blessing for a few more days of good fortune and peace, which is the beginning of it, Shavua Tov, the beginning of a new week. So whatever.
Great observation, Alan, really, because it bookends it, and it obviously makes it even more meaningful. Sandy.
I don't know, you may have discussed this before, but somebody asked about the title 6 days. I thought, and this may be wrong, I remember the 8 days of Passover, and the first 2 days were very observant. And the rest of the week, I believe I went back to school, but most of the Orthodox in our community did not. So there were 6 more days of Passover when they could do things like go to a ball game or do things, but yet they carried their matzah sandwiches. So to me, that's what I assumed the 6 days were.
Oh, interesting. I mean, you still have at the end of Pesach, Yisker and, even our office is closed. We have Yisker. So still observed in the reform movement as well. I find, Lynn, go ahead.
No, I'm just going back to the last line because Ellen referenced it. It is to the present. It seems as if in those last, particularly David's gesture, never really mouthed the words, just chanted the melody along with the rest of the men. Some bringing cigarettes. Look at the juxtaposition of the cigarette smoke with chanting a melody. You can almost see the smoke coming out of their mouths. Looking around them at the new season, coming out to praise God's world and ask his blessing for a few more days of good fortune and peace. And that, I think, relates to Elaine and compromise. And, you know, all of life is this trying to reach some sort of reconciliation between two sides. And I think it ends with hope in this story. You know, you don't have to adopt somebody's point of view. I keep saying this. It's the understanding of somebody's. It's not tolerating. You don't want that word, but it is an understanding of somebody's point of view. The new season in our world right now, where is it? Where are we going to land?
Yeah. You know, giving a plug for another one of my programs, Jim Kenney will be here after the elections. And I always resonate with what he has to say, but, and I asked him last time he was here, you know, what about, you know, this isn't the Macomb, you know, this is the Vanessa speaking, you know, these red, you know, people from red states and people who vote only Republican, you know, I can't understand them. I can't compromise on certain things. And so and he said, don't try. That's what Jim Kenney said. He goes, don't even try.
Well, the person whose daughter wrote the thesis on, was that Beverly?
Bev, yes.
Okay, so I know a person who wrote her thesis on why young people are drawn to orthodoxy.
Oh,
so you get the two different points of view. And so that's an attempt to try to understand why, you know, why some people need this structure and why people reject it. So this is life. I mean, we're dealing with this all the time. Perspective is, you know, people always say to the person they're disagreeing with, well, that's how you see it. You know, that's your perspective. And you have to sort of give validity to somebody's perspective, even though you think it's a bunch
all right. I have Evie, Merle, then Bev. Evie, go.
Oh, me too.
And then I'm Izzy. All right, I'll get you all in.
No, it's okay. I keep raising my hand and it goes.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I feel that the compromise is both a blessing and a curse. I mean, I find myself compromising all the time, and I find it a real privilege to be able to do that. And then at times I almost find it overwhelming. Who am I and what are my values and so forth? And we had an experience just this weekend where I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but I will say, I have two wonderful sets of families. Sometimes there's been conflict and sometimes it's been painful between the two of them. And we had movie night on Sunday night with just our grandchildren and one parent, which was wonderful. I mean, the kids wanted to do that, wanted to watch a movie with Julian. And so we ordered in pizza. Well, I've always gone back and forth with my own level of kashrut. You know, we go back and forth until things don't even make sense anymore. And when one of my granddaughters called and said, I talked to Joshua and Ethan, and we all decided that we want pizza and we want either one cheese and one pepperoni. And I thought, okay, that was my compromise. And it was hard for me to do. I enjoyed it. But if I had to explain it, I would have difficulty with it. But I think they were always making just little adjustments. And I have to say, one of the things that made us comfortable at a Reformed congregation, and Vanessa, you mentioned Jim Kenney, it was when we first joined Soledad many years ago, and Ron Miller, may he rest in peace, was one of the presenters, and then Common Ground became a very important part of our lives for many years. And when we had left where we were in between, which was Eitz Chaim, which was a little more traditional than Julian wanted in terms of a 3.5 hour service. Comment. But and we went to a lecture at Common Ground, and Rabbi Ike was the speaker. And I said, Lakeside, what? It was never ever on our radar screen. And sure enough, a couple of Sunday mornings, and here we are. And then back home to, when I say back home to back home, excuse me. But I think we're all kind of shifting in our own ways. And part of me can't take that little girl who grew up at Torah Center and the Academy out of the picture too. There are times where I so appreciate my comfort level in any kind of a synagogue, whatever. But I also pick and choose what my comfort level is. And I think that's a scenario for life, as many of us are living either by choice or by default. So that's what I have to say. So listening to the story, I'm going to reread it, and I think I like it more than I thought I would.
There you go. That's 55 minutes to. I have Judy Biederman, Bev, and then Izzy. Oh, Merle, go first. Sorry.
Okay. Getting back to the theme about the secular versus religious, I think there's a certain amount of fear on the part of the father, Birnbaum, David's father, when he actually takes him to a secular experience, because at the baseball game, the boy is reaching for the ball. He stands up on his bench and he's falling. His son is actually falling. So he says, hands reached for David, alien, goyish faces, fists, teeth. They were in a mob. Birnbaum's heart pushed into his throat as he reached for his boy to take him and run. And I mean, that was like, wow. I mean, we didn't hear any mention of people of other religions until this point.
Mhm.
There's this fear of, the goyish faces, fists, and teeth, how people who are in this position where they're worried about the secular versus the religious life. I mean, this man is really tormented. And Vanessa, I wrote to you about, can I mention this?
Sure.
I was talking to someone who lives in Minnesota who belongs to a Reform synagogue, where if there's a bar mitzvah and the bar mitzvah boy's father is not Jewish, he's not allowed to say the Hebrew blessings before the reading of the Torah when the boy goes to read from the Torah. But at our synagogue, it's okay. I actually wrote a letter to Rabbi Moffick, and he did respond that at our synagogue, the non-Jewish father is absolutely allowed to participate fully, whether it's Hebrew or English. He participates fully. But at many Reform synagogues, this is not the case. And what is that about? Fear, because in the exact words of the prayer, the Torah was given to us, Natan Lanu. Okay, and the non-Jewish person is not us. So that because of this one line in the prayer, they're not allowed to participate. But I thought that was fascinating that some Reform synagogues prohibit a non-Jew from saying Hebrew. Okay, I don't know.
It's not the Hebrew.
Okay.
Rabbi Ike would say it's a converting moment. And, I think it's much more complex than just saying the Hebrew. It's what the Hebrew means and what it means, for other people when they're called to the Torah as well.
But why is it okay here at Makam?
Because that's in our mission and vision, and we've agreed upon that. I mean,
so are you saying that, I know the whole controversy we had when we would not allow non-Jews to be on the Bima.
Yep.
But that was decades ago, and then there was a whole evolution. So
right. And you have to talk it through, and it's not a black and white. There's a lot of gray, I believe.
I'm
all right,
because I have to sign off. I will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Okay,
so much.
sorry, Bev. We'll get to you next time. Great to have you.
Bye.
Bye.
Izzy.
Nice meeting you. Oh, when I first started reading it, the first page, I really got very, very upset. I didn't understand what this meant. He said his father never said a word, but the boy understood that these people had what should be theirs, at least a portion of it, but that never would be. And it was a measure of the world's perversity, the inherent fairness of things, that this would always be so.
Economic disparity.
Well,
Economic.
that's what got me to
disparity, that it would
minorities. That's what
Never
got me
be
to
theirs,
minorities.
because they know that they would always be poor and that other people would
Yes.
have different things. It's a recognition of the other world. And funny thing, when we were talking about generations, my daughter keeps kosher. And I went out for dinner with my granddaughter and she had a cheeseburger or something. And I said, why are you doing this? And she took half of it home. And I said, how do you put it in your refrigerator? She says, I wrap it in tin foil so no one knows what it is. And then I have it for breakfast so no one sees me or I take it to school. And she said her brother does the same thing. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, so this is exactly. So you know she's not going to grow up to be kosher. You know he's not either. The little ones, I don't know what they're 12 years old. They're twins. I don't know what's going to happen to them.
Yikes.
But I just got such a kick out of that. Exactly what you were.
Yeah,
exactly
yeah. Judy Biederman.
Well, a couple of things. Many years ago, we were at a wedding, and one of Chicago's pretty prominent Orthodox rabbis was a guest. And this was a fairly upscale wedding and all of that. And it was noticeable to everybody that he read a book through the entire time and then put himself off in a corner and stayed there with the book. And it was truly kind of rude. So I think one thing about this story is that it kind of softens a person's view of orthodoxy. Because sometimes you'll meet Orthodox, really, really Orthodox, not, contemporary Orthodox, who come off as kind of high-handed and that you are not quite as good at Jews as they are. And that's a kind of a pervasive attitude also. But I loved Lynn's take on the walk, because that walk early on is an attempt to smooth out the differences and create a dialogue between the Orthodox viewpoint and a more worldly viewpoint. So I think it's a nice story for softening the view of orthodoxy, which can come across as kind of high-handed and kind of a put down to the much less observant Jewish community. So I thought the story did a good job, particularly since we know he came from Jerusalem and now, where is he? Corvallis.
Right.
So,
Right. So as we wrap up, first, I'm going to I have a poll just kind of asking you if you want to come back in person. It's something we can talk about. Full transparency. There's a time in October when I'll be in DC. That'll have to be on Zoom. We can go. There can be a lot of different mitigations for that. I also thought it was really lucky that we read this right before the High Holy Days, because it kind of gets you into that. And I don't know that we answered if this was generational or secular versus religious, but it's good for us to think about. Wait a minute, Elaine.
Okay, I have a last word. I think that this story emphasizes what's wrong in our world, that we are lacking compromise and that we don't understand different views. And that is my last statement.
Okay, I like that. Lynn.
I just want to say, piggybacking on you, that I often told my students that compromise is a sign of strength, not weakness. That if you are able to compromise, you have a handle on yourself, you have self-esteem, you feel confident about yourself, you feel so confident that you're willing to bend because you're not going to break. So I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
People fear compromising. They think they're coming off as weak.
Right.
It's the opposite.
I like this story. I like it even more. I'm going to share my results. You didn't, it's a draw, people. It's a draw. So I'll be talking to you all, and you know, we meet again. Let's see, I brought this up. Let's see. We meet again in 2 weeks, and the next one is by a male writer, The True World by Jonathan Rosen.
Yeah, I have to say,
And then we have 2 women after that. Ellen.
Are we on a first week and third week rotation?
Yes.
Okay, so as far as we know, it's the first and third week of every month, unless you tell us for whatever
Yes.
reason. You're
Otherwise, let me just, I don't know why it's not. Oh, here it is. I knew I brought it up. Just didn't see it. Yeah. So the next one is September 21st, which is, the 3rd. Now in October, it's not the 5th because that's Yom Kippur.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm just copying them down, so that's
Right.
good. I
And then the 19th, I'm going to be in DC. So we probably aren't going to come back until November, and then it'll be winter and bad weather.
What does that mean?
Forget
Does
it.
that mean we're not going to meet on the 19th?
No, we're meeting. No. Oh, no, we're going to meet. It'll be on Zoom.
Oh,
On
it'll
the
be Zoom.
21st.
Okay.
Yeah. But we're not meeting on October 4th. That's Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
I
Okay.
have to say how much I missed you all this summer, and I enjoy this group so much. I think you
I
women
agree.
are amazing.
I agree.
Thank you, Elaine. I didn't pay her to say that.
No, it's true. It's true. I think you all have very good insight, and I enjoy it very much and look forward to it. Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you. The
Bye-bye.
first couple of minutes of book group, I'm like, are they going to like it? What are they going to say? But it's great seeing everyone. I hope to see you in person at the High Holy Days, and be well.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Take care.